In the middle of a Las Vegas casino floor, on an ordinary evening, a man in his 40s stood at a slot machine and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a thin, flexible wand, no longer than a pencil, attached to a small fiber optic light. He slid it quietly into the machine's coin payout chute. The light flickered against a sensor. The machine began to pay out. It kept paying, far longer than it should have. Coins dropped steadily into the tray. To the people around him, he looked like a lucky player having a good night. To the cameras overhead, he looked like a man standing at a slot machine. Nobody stopped him. By the time he walked away, he had collected hundreds of dollars in minutes, using a device he had built himself, for a few dollars in parts. His name was Tommy Glenn Carmichael, a former TV repairman from Tulsa, Oklahoma. No engineering degree, no organized crime connections, no financial backing. What he had was something the casinos had never fully prepared for. He understood machines. How did a broke TV repairman from Tulsa beat some of the most protected gambling machines in America for nearly 2 decades? And why did the casinos later need his help to stop it? To understand what Tommy did, you first have to understand why casinos were supposed to be impossible to beat. Casino floors were covered with surveillance cameras, monitoring every machine from multiple angles. Security staff watched live feeds around the clock. Floor personnel were trained to notice unusual behavior near machines. Irregular positioning, repeated visits, suspicious hand movements near payout chutes. The machines themselves were certified by state gaming commissions, tested regularly, and sealed against tampering. Any player caught interfering with a machine faced immediate arrest and serious federal charges. Cheating a casino was not a misdemeanor. It was a felony. And yet, between 1980 and 1999, one man beat that system over and over again. Not with hacking, not with inside help, and not with luck. The house edge was already taking its cut from every legitimate player in the building. For most people, the rational move was to lose slowly and go home. Tommy had a different idea of what rational looked like. Tommy was not a hacker. He was not a mathematician. He was the guy you called when your television stopped working. He had spent years running a TV repair shop, diagnosing circuits, tracing faults, understanding the internal logic of devices that most people only ever saw from the outside. He also worked as a locksmith. Locksmiths do not break locks by force. They study how a lock is designed, find the point where the design has a vulnerability, and use that vulnerability to open it without a key. That combination, the repairman's understanding of how machines work, and the locksmith's instinct for finding where they fail, turned out to be exactly what slot machine cheating required. Nobody in casino security had written a manual for that particular skill set. In the early 1980s, a friend introduced Tommy to the slider, a thin piece of metal fed into the coin mechanism to trick a machine into releasing a payout. Simple, crude, but effective enough to show Tommy something important. Slot machines were not magic. They were mechanical devices, and mechanical devices had weaknesses. The slider worked for a while, but it required an obvious movement near the machine's exterior, and Tommy knew the casinos would eventually close that gap. So he went home and started building something better. What followed was months of work inside a cluttered garage. Old slot machine parts spread across a workbench, metal rods, guitar strings, spools of wire, small lights. He would build something, test it, watch it fail, take it apart, and start again. Neighbors would have seen nothing unusual, just a repairman tinkering in his garage. That was exactly what he was. The monkey paw was the result. A thin metal rod bent into a precise shape and attached to a guitar string for flexibility. Slid up through the payout chute, it tripped the coin release mechanism inside the machine, causing it to empty without triggering the counting system, reportedly pulling close to $1,000 an hour from machines that had no idea what was happening to them. The casinos responded. Chute modifications, internal barriers, angles blocked. Each upgrade forced Tommy to adapt. And each time he did, the next tool was more sophisticated than the last. In the late 1980s, slot machine manufacturers introduced optical sensors, small infrared light beams inside the payout chute, that registered each coin as it passed through. Fast, accurate, and far harder to manipulate than any mechanical counter. The industry exhaled. The problem, they believed, was solved. For most cheaters, this was the end. Tommy went home and started experimenting. This time the workbench looked different. No metal rods, no guitar strings. The problem was electronic, so the solution had to be two. He worked through fiber optic components, testing how much light different sensors could handle before they stopped functioning. He failed. He adjusted. He tried again. What he eventually developed was a device no bigger than a pen. You'd find in a hotel room, a thin wand with a bright fiber optic light at its tip. Inserted into the payout chute, it flooded the sensor with intense light. That blinded it completely. A blinded sensor could not count what was passing through. The machine paid, and paid, and paid. The light wand was a precise exploit of one design assumption. No engineer had questioned that a sensor built to detect the interruption of light could not itself be overwhelmed by too much of it. The casinos had outsmarted the mechanical cheaters. They had not accounted for a man who read the solution and immediately started looking for its flaw. Here is what it looked like in practice. Tommy would enter a casino, dressed like any other patron. He would sit down at a machine, usually in a mid-traffic area, not too isolated, not too crowded. He would play normally at first, feeding coins, pulling the handle, so, watching the reels. Nothing that would make a floor supervisor glance twice. Then he would wait. He was watching the floor, not the machine, tracking the rhythm of the security rotation, noting where the nearest camera was angled, waiting for the moment when the natural noise of the casino created just enough distraction. When the moment came, his hand moved, slowly, naturally, toward the coin tray. A brief motion near the payout chute, invisible to anyone not specifically watching for it. The wand went in. The light made contact with the sensor. The machine began paying out. Coins filled the tray, then kept filling. Tommy stayed still. The posture of a man enjoying a lucky streak, not a man committing a federal crime. If a security guard looked his way, they saw a player at a machine. If a camera caught the angle, it showed hands in a natural, resting position. The payout ran far longer than it should have. Then Tommy collected his coins, cashed out, and walked toward the exit, at the pace of a man who had no reason to hurry. By the time anyone thought to look closely, he was already gone. For nearly a decade, Tommy moved through the casino world like a ghost. Las Vegas, Atlantic City, and beyond. He reportedly recruited partners to work multiple machines simultaneously. On some runs, the group was said to have collected tens of thousands of dollars over a single trip. For a while, the numbers looked like ordinary variance. Slot machines have good nights and bad nights. Casino finance teams wrote off the anomalies and moved on. Then the anomalies stopped being random. Payout irregularities began appearing at multiple properties, different cities, different machines, different nights, but with a strange consistency in the numbers. Gaming surveillance analysts pulled the footage. Frame by frame, they found it. A consistent hand position, a brief motion near the chute, invisible to the casual eye, just before an unusually long payout sequence began. The same motion, the same moment, across dozens of incidents, in multiple states. The walls were beginning to close, slowly, quietly, the same way Tommy had always worked. The industry was learning to read the pattern he had left behind. By the mid-1990s, Gaming regulators reportedly knew what the light wand was. And the FBI, with the patience of people who had been handed a very interesting file, began building a case. Tommy had spent 16 years studying machines. Now, the machine was studying him. The arrest did not look like a dramatic confrontation. It looked exactly like every other night. Tommy entered a casino. He sat down at a machine. He played normally at first. The same routine, the same patience, the same careful reading of the floor. He had done this hundreds of times before. The motion was second nature now, almost automatic. What Tommy did not know was that the motion was already familiar to the people watching the monitors. Investigators had been tracking the pattern for months. They had his footage from multiple properties. They had studied his hand position, his timing, his casino entry and exit patterns. They had been waiting for exactly this moment, watching the same way he watched, waiting the same way he waited. He reached toward the payout chute. The wand went in. The machine began to pay, and the trap closed. Security moved in, as the coins were still dropping. The device that had made Tommy invisible for nearly 2 decades was in his hand when they reached him. The evidence was direct. The case was clear. Tommy Glenn Carmichael was arrested, convicted on federal gaming fraud charges, and sentenced. He served time. The man who had studied machines his entire life had finally been studied back. But the story did not end with the sentence. It ended with a phone call from the people he had spent 20 years stealing from. Casino security teams, gaming regulators, and slot machine manufacturers reportedly came to him, not to prosecute him further, but to learn from him. Tommy had not just used the vulnerabilities. He had designed the tools that exploited them across multiple generations of machine technology and understood the weaknesses at a level no one inside the industry had matched. He cooperated. He demonstrated how the devices worked. He explained which design assumptions had made each exploit possible. And then, Tommy Glenn Carmichael began designing anti-cheating devices, attempting to use his knowledge to close the same gaps he had spent years exploiting. He did not walk away clean. He served time. He paid the legal consequences of what he did. The casinos he defrauded lost real money, and the law treated it as the crime it was. But the final chapter of his story is not a prison cell. It is a drawing board. The casinos needed the one person who had understood their machines better than the people who built them. And that person was the broke TV repairman from Tulsa, who had spent 16 years proving that no system, no matter how carefully it was built, is stronger than someone who takes the time to truly understand it. The man who broke the system spent his final chapter helping build the one that replaced it.